Welcome back, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers. I am Josh Queipo. I'm here with a special guest, and we're here to talk trenches. I have with me Brandon Thorn, who is one of the, I would say, preeminent people out in the public space talking about offensive and defensive line. Brandon has some amazing content out there, starting with his Substack, which is Trench Warfare. He also works with Establish the Run. He has offensive line masterminds with Duke Manyweather. Brandon, welcome to the Pewter Report podcast. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about some of the content that you've been putting out recently, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit into the Bucs, specifically their offensive line, maybe get a little bit into the defensive line a little bit later.
Yeah, so great intro there, and great to be with you. Thanks for all those kind words. And yeah, I focus on offensive and defensive line. In terms of my work, people can follow me on Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL or Instagram. I post tons of videos there as well. A lot of college stuff on Instagram if guys are interested there in looking at that. So, and then trenchwarfare.substack.com is my Substack, as you mentioned. That's where I put a lot of the stuff that I'm most interested in out. I did a couple film rooms this week, including one with Mark Schlereth on the art of the cut block, where we just dive into the block watching Chris Lindstrom film, who, maybe some of your listeners are familiar with him being in the division, outstanding offensive lineman. So I did that. Have another film room coming actually either today or tomorrow with an NFL player. So I do stuff like that throughout the year. I'm going to have a lot of film rooms with top prospects in this upcoming class, offensive line class, as I do every year. So yeah, I do a lot of really cool stuff there that I enjoy. And then Establish the Run. I rank all 32 offensive and defensive lines every week, every year for them. Bleacher Report, scouting all eligible offensive linemen in the draft for the fourth year in a row. So yeah, and then offensive line masterminds is another thing I'm a part of, and Joe Moore Awards, another one. So yeah, a bunch of different offensive line related stuff.
Awesome. And what's really great is that you get into the nuance of offensive and defensive line play. It's not just about, say, reading a box score and saying this guy had 13 sacks, therefore he's really great. One of the things that I really enjoy that you put out is you kind of create a true sack score, right? As part of your Substack. And in terms of what types of pressures and what types of sacks are credited more to the individual player, say winning a one-on-one matchup versus things where it was schemed up. So just a lot of really great content. But for today, I was hoping that we could dive into kind of the Bucs offensive line. Obviously, with our viewers being most interested with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I thought I'd just kind of start things off. Bucs general manager Jason Licht, he's a former offensive lineman himself. And that seems to be where a lot of his best moves have come from in terms of the draft, some of his free agent signings. And I was hoping to get your take just over the years as he has built and kind of had to turn over the Bucs offensive line. You think about draft picks like Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet, more recently Tristan Wirfs, Luke Goedeke, Robert Hainsey, and even some of like his free agent additions like Ryan Jensen. For you, as somebody who really dives deep into offensive line play, what would be your assessment of Jason Licht in terms of how he builds out an offensive line?
I would say I'm a huge fan. Ultimately, what it comes down to, just especially when you look at the other 31 teams and track records of, draft picks, free agent signings, development, whatnot, of those guys, which is obviously part of the credit to the coaching staff as well. But I mean, in terms of his assessments and everything, and his ability to find hidden talent, from small schools, and his affinity for small school offensive linemen is one of my favorite things. I love finding hidden talent for offensive linemen as well. So I have a good feeling if, I was able to ever sit in a room with him, we would have some good conversations, just because the guys that he likes, the style of players that he likes. I mean, I totally can see his type, and, I think he's made a lot more good decisions than bad. And it's been very impressive the way that he has built and maintained and restocked the offensive line since he's been there.
Yep. One of those players, after he was drafted his first year, didn't look so great, right? So that's Luke Goedeke coming out of Central Michigan. He was the right tackle in college. Mm-hmm. The Bucs tried to move him, not just inside, but move him from right to left as left guard. Last year, objectively, it was not a good year. Goedeke ends up getting benched about halfway through the season.
Yep.
It looked like the Bucs took a huge chance by moving him back to right tackle and not really hedging their bets in terms of free agency or the draft by getting anybody who could potentially take over if Goedeke were to falter again this year. Fortunately for the Bucs, that hasn't happened. Goedeke has been a bit of a revelation, right? One of the better offensive tackles in football this year, if you ask me. And I was just wondering, what have you seen with Goedeke transitioning back to right tackle that's allowed him to play at such a higher level than he did last year?
Well, I mean, he is definitely a natural right tackle. That is evident based on how he's played, based on how he played in college, his experience, at that position. And it just brings me back to the fact, really, that there are some players who aren't able to be moved around and maintain their effectiveness equally or even close, nowhere near close in some cases, as with him. So, that's just, I think, something that gets misunderstood sometimes from the outside looking in on offensive line is some players, are able to adapt to, kicking inside or even switching sides, which is a little bit more of a challenge. Some guys can just do that, at a higher level than others. And I think that is ultimately, kind of a, it adds to their value. And the fact that Goedeke cannot do that is, I don't think it hinders him too much because he does have a position of strength, and that's right tackle. And I just got done with a film room, actually, just kind of a teaser here with Kevin Dotson, who is the right guard with the Rams. And he got moved to left guard after he got drafted as a right guard, played right guard since high school all through college. As a rookie with the Steelers in 2020, was really good there. And then he got moved to left guard, and he was not the same player. That led him to get traded for, day 3 pick swaps, basically, right before this season. Mm-hmm. And now he's back at right guard, and he looks really good. So this is just another one of those examples with Goedeke. And when you watch him on film, I mean, I think it all kind of boils down to what I liked about him coming out as a prospect and why I was, fairly high on him as a prospect, although I thought that, he would maybe need to kick inside. And I think that was the error on my part, was thinking just based on kind of him being a sawed off kind of guy, very short arms, one of the 2 or 3 tackles in football right now with under 33-inch arms, I believe. And I'm not too much of a stickler on length if you reach a certain benchmark, but he didn't reach it. But he's one of those guys that, because of his play strength, I think, and he has enough athletic ability to get to spots and to play with a good base and good balance. And then I think the thing that when you watch him, I just watched the Falcons game, literally just finished it, and you watch him, and I've watched him throughout the year, his ability to absorb force in his anchor, rework his hands inside, and force guys to go down the middle of him is, really good, man. I mean, he's able to dictate terms to pass rushers more often than not. You do see the lack of length affect him. It did once in the Falcons game. I forgot who it was. I think it was Bud Dupree. Got inside of him and kind of walked him back into the quarterback a little bit. And Goedeke just had no method of like recourse or kind of like breaking that contact, right? He was just not long enough. But that, it's kind of few and far between because he plays with good technique and he gets his hands back inside usually. So he's able to work around it in a really cool way. And he's strong, he's physical. He still brings kind of like a lot of the attributes of a guard to the tackle position. And he's just having a good year, man. I mean, I think he's a good starter.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. And there were 2 things that I've noticed, and I was wondering if you could speak to it and, A, say if I'm on the right track with this analysis, and B, maybe expand upon it. Number one, while he does a really great job of kind of keeping himself between the defender and the quarterback, he does have a tendency to kind of condense the pocket. And you talked about how he handles power. You know, he makes it really difficult and forces guys to go through his center, and he does have a strong anchor, but that anchor kind of comes on the second or third step, which does allow the pocket to condense a little bit on the quarterback. The second thing that was really interesting, and you didn't get to see it quite as much with the Falcons game because they used Calais Campbell a little bit more inside due to the injuries they had on the interior, is the first Falcons matchup, Goedeke struggled against Campbell. And just in general, it seems like those power bull rushers have given him the most fits this year versus guys who try to win on the edge. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Have you seen that in his game? Do you think that those are things that he can improve as he moves into, say, next year, which would be his second year at the NFL level at right tackle?
Yeah, well, I will say with anchoring in the NFL, you are going to give up a step or two or three 99% of the time. It's just unrealistic to expect a guy to just, lock a guy up and him not get any penetration. You see that in college sometimes, but in the pros, it's just not real.
Gotcha.
So I think that's important context to point out. However, there's a fine line to giving up a few steps and maybe giving up a few bigger steps than you need to. And, it's just kind of a fine line of, giving up a little versus just a little too much. And he walks that line and kind of steps over it sometimes. And I think it all comes back down to, well, not all, but a lot of it is what I just mentioned in terms of his lack of length. When guys get inside of him, and typically you mentioned Calais Campbell. I mean, Calais Campbell's, 6'8", with, incredibly long arms. Then it becomes a leverage battle that he just is not physically equipped to win because of his lack of length. Now, there are ways to mitigate that and work around it. Break contact, snatch trap, Hamilton technique where you unlock upwards, or you snatch the arm down downwards in a downwards motion. So there's ways to like break contact so you can reestablish leverage. But if he's unable to do that, guys are able to kind of press and lock him out, and he just doesn't have the length to get back inside. So that is going to, I think, always happen in his career because he is an outlier in that way with length. Now, like I said, he can get better technique in terms of breaking contact, releveraging, and things like that. And we see him do that. And then his ability to succeed against speed rushers, I think a lot of it has to do with getting to his spot first and forcing those speed rushers to work down the center of him, or at least mostly down the center of him. And then that's where his play strength can really take over. And he does, I would say, have pretty good hands as well. You see him work a lot of independent hands in, and his ability to refit and releverage is pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, he's a good player. I don't know. I have no idea what he's, grading out as. I hate some of the narratives that those grades create. But either way, when I watch him and compare him to other 31 right tackles and the other guys I watch a lot, I would say he's an above average starter, trending in the right direction, second year. And don't forget, he hasn't been playing football a whole lot. He was a guy who, in college, just hadn't been playing offensive line, a whole lot prior to getting drafted. So I definitely think the arrow is pointed up and he could get better. I don't think he's ever going to be elite, but yeah, man, I mean, he's going to be probably like a really quality starter for a long time. I'd be surprised if he wasn't.
Awesome. We had mentioned a little bit earlier about Goedeke, how they tried to transition him right to left, didn't really work out. You talked a little bit about there are some guys who can do it, some guys who can't. Huge debate among Bucs fans this past offseason because the Bucs did transition somebody from the right side to the left side, somebody who has been elite, and that is now left tackle Tristan Wirfs.
Yep.
He seems to have made the transition pretty well. I'd say, based on my own analysis, he's not as good as a left tackle as he is as a right tackle. Some of that is because I do think he's been hampered by some nagging injuries over recent weeks. But I wanted to give you the space to talk a little bit about Wirfs, who was, top two, him and Lane Johnson, basically, as a right tackle. Where does he kind of slot in among the landscape of left tackles in the NFL? And do you think, again, with another year of growth on that side, could we see another level of Tristan Wirfs, say, in 2024?
Yeah, I guess to start, that decision to transition him to the left side, so Goedeke could play right, definitely carried some risk. Obviously, switching, an elite starting right tackle or any either side tackle to the opposite side. I mean, you're playing with fire maybe a little bit there, but the way that they did it, I think, is the best way to do it. They did it early. They let Tristan know early. He has been, repping left side since spring. So he had all of spring, all of training camp, and that's the best way to do it. So they handled it well. Of course, a Jason Light team handled the offensive line well. I think in terms of making that decision and maximizing, Tristan's ability to do it successfully. And then Wirfs is, he's just kind of a freak in a lot of ways as well. I would say he's been probably very good this year. At left guard, I think he's definitely one of the 5 best left tackles in football. Now, the recent weeks it has been more up and down. That Colts game, losing, getting beat from on that sack for, what was that, Samson Ekubon, Ebukan or whatever. So yeah, like he'll have some, clean losses, and he did earlier in the year. I remember against the Eagles, Jalen Carter got him on a stunt once, and so he has, it's kind of a feeling out period. You're switching sides. I mean, this is a major thing. So nothing that's alarming, I would say. You still see a lot of how he was winning on the right side, transpire, with his left tackle film. So I feel very good about this switch overall. I think he's probably going to be a top 5-ish left tackle. I think that's probably his floor, moving forward. So, I mean, I would say, with that said, it's definitely a successful move, and just total credit to them and the staff and him and everybody. Because, man, to be able to do that and improve 2 positions, really, I mean, that's like the dream. So it's it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and with huge risk to both of them, which is the incredible thing, that given all of the potential outcomes, both have been really high end in terms of what could have happened.
Yeah.
Another guy that kind of had, the Bucs have moved, and this one, moving in from college, the Bucs took Cody Mauch in the 2nd round this year, made an immediate starter. He's a left tackle at North Dakota State, which is a FCS school and powerhouse, but at the same time, not really the same level of competition you're really going to face as compared to the NFL. Took him from left, took him from left tackle, and they made him their right guard this year. You had mentioned that some of the grading sites create narratives that maybe are unfair to players. For full transparency, Pro Football Focus has him rated very poorly, one of the worst rated guards in the NFL. For me, when I watch him, I do see losses, which is understandable given all of the transitions that he's making, and that he's probably not at the weight that you would ideally want for an interior offensive lineman yet. And he has some room to grow there and develop his play strength. But looking at him throughout an individual game, you see some early losses, but you never see him really lose the same way twice, which kind of goes to the intellect that he brings to the position, that he's constantly learning. He's like, okay, if he got me this way, I'm going to prevent it from happening again later on. And then you see some very high-end wins. What's been really cool about Mauch, from my perspective, has been his pass protection overall has been a lot better than I would have expected. And I was just wondering, have you seen the same thing when you've evaluated Mauch? What are some of the things that you find encouraging? And overall, do you think that the future looks bright for Cody Mauch in the Bucs offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the last part first, I do think that the future's pretty bright with Cody Mauch. He like you mentioned, he's undersized, both weight and, length is okay. 32 and change. So, just a little bit kind of like he has kind of like a high cut, sawed off build. He's lean, and you see that affect his, ability to anchor sometimes, to deal with guys getting inside his body. He can have some pretty ugly losses, which he has in terms of just kind of getting blown up, pried open, things like that. So that has happened throughout the year. But, that one of the things with the grades is there's just no context, right? Like, and I evaluated him coming out of college and everything, and just kind of looking at him, and he's such a good athlete. And I think that that's what you see in his ability to recover sometimes when guys are crossing his face, his ability to redirect, cut that off. We saw it in the Atlanta game a couple times for sure. He also had a bad loss where he got driven into Baker Mayfield and they both basically got tackled. There was a rep like that. However, there was 2 reps where he anchored, really well, kind of reset himself, regained one leverage, and anchored really well against power once, and then against a move across his face, cut it off. So and he's handling stunts really well as well. Him and Goedeke, you could see that's a promising duo over there. But yeah, just a really good athlete, walk on tight end at a small school college. He was a great high school athlete in basketball, baseball, track, football, all this stuff, tested really well, of course. And so when you consider his background of being, a really high-end athlete who's coming from a small school against, subpar competition, the transition as a rookie is going to be pretty dramatic, especially because he's a little undersized as well. So when you factor all that in, you look at his film, you see how he's winning in the ways that he's winning and some of the consistency coming. And then, of course, the physical, relentless mindset and as a finisher is there as well, which you pair that with a really good athlete. That's, I think, one of the things that Jason Licht likes so much with the small school guys. Mauch certainly fits that mold. From what I understand, is very, very smart, as well. So I think it's just a matter of time before he just gets better and better. I had him pegged coming in as I think I had a 3rd round grade on him, high quality backup or potential starter right away. He, is on the upper end of that. He's a starter. It's up and down as expected, but based on my evaluation, based on expectations, I think he's kind of right in line. And, I think the arrow's pointed up with him as well. So yeah, it looks promising overall.
Awesome. Now, those are kind of the 3 pillars of the future of the Bucs offensive line. You do have a couple of other spots where the Bucs have gone with, I would say, stopgaps, right? So the plan was for Ryan Jensen to still be the Bucs center. Unfortunately, terrible injury. There's a good chance that Jensen doesn't play another down in the NFL. Robert Hainsey, for the 2nd year in a row, is filling in, basically playing not basically, he's played the entire season this year, the entire season last year. The Bucs have gone with 2 different left guards this year. They started with Matt Filer. They've since moved to Aaron Stinney, who played admirably, I would say, when Filer went down with injury, well enough that they've now named him kind of the starter going forward. Do you see either of these players as, or any of the 3, I would say, even including Filer, if maybe you think he might be or should be re-signed, do you see any of them as other pillars of the future of the Bucs offensive line, or do you think those are opportunities for Licht to maybe upgrade? And if so, are there any players in the 2024 upcoming NFL draft that you think could profile well in between Goedeke, Wirfs, and Mauch?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of relative and depending on the situation, like the opportunity cost, in terms of yeah, I mean, they could be upgraded for sure, but what is it going to cost, in terms of draft allocation or money and stuff like that, who's available, whatnot. So I would say the easier guy to replace would probably be left guard, and getting another left guard in. Watching Hainsey this year, I mean, I definitely think he's better than he was last year. Again, a position switch for him. He played tackle at Notre Dame. I think, pretty clearly he wasn't going to play tackle in the NFL. However, that's what he played. I think he had all 34 of his career starts at right tackle at Notre Dame and then made that transition inside. So it's been rocky. But this year, definitely better. I mean, he's still, again, kind of undersized, kind of a lean, narrow sort of build. Not a lot of square power, just physically, night and day from Ryan Jensen, who's a barrel chest, big center. So very different in that regard, but I do think he's gotten better this year, especially as the year's gone on. And, I think if you want to roll with him, another year at center and then, get another left guard and a younger guy in at left guard in the draft, I think the opportunity will be there. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. But even if they kept this as is, I don't think that's, even that bad of a thing either. This is one of the 10 best offensive lines in the NFL right now, I think. So I don't think it's, like a glaring need. But if the opportunity is there and it's a guy that Light loves, I mean, I'm sure, we could see somebody added. I'm sure there's going to be at least a day 3 guy added in the draft somewhere.
Yeah, that what you just said, top 10, that's the clip that we're going to definitely use there, because I think a lot of Bucs fans would be surprised to hear somebody who devotes so much time into understanding this saying that they're a top 10 offensive line. It's been a bit of a point of contention among a lot of our viewers and listeners and readers. So, well, I appreciate all of the information. Oh, I did want to ask, are there any specific prospects that you really like for potentially like a center or a left guard spot that you would want to talk a little bit about that you think the Bucs could potentially, if the value is there, target?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of guys, man. I mean, Graham Barton from Duke, left tackle, is going to play center or guard in the NFL. I like him quite a bit. He's my number 2 interior offensive line prospect right now. Kind of in the classic sort of mold of, these college left tackles that transition inside and are, above average or better starters, and there's a long list of those guys. I think an above average starter at center or guard is probably likely for him. So I have him as a second round grade. He battled injury this year and, was a little up and down, but he had some really standout performances as well against FSU edge rusher Jared Verse. They kind of went back and forth with each other, but Barton had some like commanding reps on him where he kind of physically dominated him, which was cool to see. So Barton would maybe be one of those guys, day 2, left guard or center potential replacements that I think that, they would be interested in. Cooper Beebe is another guy I have a second round grade on. He's like my 4th or 5th interior offensive line prospect. And I could see teams liking him, more than me, probably. I mean, you know what you're getting with him. He's 6'4", almost 340. And he's built just like a refrigerator, dude. I mean, this dude's just thick, like strapping dude who's powerful. Square power is there, delivers a lot of jolt on contact. He's smart in terms of being able to handle position switches. He's played multiple positions in game this year and throughout his career, primarily left guard, but I've seen him at left tackle as well. So, he's smart, he's strong, and he's big. Now he's not, like the best athlete. I would say he's not a bad athlete, but more average. So high floor player for sure. He's somebody I could see them liking. There's some later round guys that I think are really interesting. There's actually a guy who may not be a later round guy he was a consensus All-American, won the Remington Award this year. Oregon center Jackson Powers Johnson. He's built a little bit like Ryan Jensen, and he plays with a similar demeanor. So he's a big dude, big center, 6'3", 320. So he would kind of be more in line with Jensen in terms of play style and size. So that's a name to file away, I would think, Jackson Powers Johnson. So he's very interesting. I need to do more digging on him. I've watched 2 games, I believe 2 or 3 games of him so far. I have a good feel, but my final grade isn't done on him yet. So that's somebody that I would definitely keep in mind. Another guy I'll throw out there, a day 3 guard I like, Christian Mahogany from Boston College. 6'3", 325, big dude. He's a total bully, like He's nasty, and he has a lot of power. I could see, Jason Licht really liking him for those reasons. He definitely needs some technique work and pass protection, but if you want to bring along a guy slowly, Christian Mahogany would be a guy I really like as well.
And the interesting thing is with the Bucs in terms of their offensive line development, you look at somebody like Mauch and you look at Tristan Wirfs coming out of college, they were seen more as advanced as run blockers, and they ended up being kind of better at pass protection early. So it would seem that somebody with that profile, the Bucs could probably do a lot with. If you don't mind, if I can keep you for a couple more minutes, I'd like to transition to the other side of the ball for the Bucs. Kind of starting with their edge room. We've talked a lot about kind of the number 2 through 4 or 5 rushers in terms of like Yaya Diaby, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Anthony Nelson, and even like a little bit of Marquise Watts, who I think most in Bucs world are kind of really excited about. There hasn't been a lot of discussion recently about Shaq Barrett. Shaq has had probably one of the worst years in America in terms of some personal tragedy, not to mention the ACL tear. I'm sorry, not ACL tear, the Achilles tear.
Yep.
But he has come back from the Achilles tear. He started off kind of hot, had some really great flashes early in the season, hasn't had a sack in the last 5 games. My take on it is, he's kind of regressed from where he was pre-injury, which is to be expected considering the injury, plus the fact that he's about 30 years old now. And that the Bucs really lack a true number 1 kind of alpha edge rusher at this point. From what you've seen of Shaq Barrett, what are some of the positives on him coming back from that injury? Where do you kind of see him slotting, and could, say, 2024 be a bit more of a bounce back year where you see him gear up closer to where he was pre-injury?
I think the Bucs definitely need a number 1 edge rusher sort of prospect. If you want to go in on one of these top guys in the draft or something somehow, if they're available, or you could trade up, or however that happens, I think they definitely need an injection of talent in the edge rusher room based on what I've seen. However, Shaq Barrett is a great guy to have in the rotation as your number 2 or probably number 2. He'd probably be a quality number 2, I think, ideally. Sort of a replaceable number 1. And I think people have to understand with Shaq Barrett, this is a guy who came in, I think he was undrafted, not a good athlete. So, coming off a torn Achilles, 30 years old, not a good athlete. I mean, obviously, the juice is the little juice that was there is, kind of been, took a hit. However, the thing that makes Shaq Barrett so fun and such a really good player is he is just an absolute technician. And that's something that ages well if he has at least, a little bit of juice, which I think, he still has. I mean, I think people, should watch, if they haven't, if they don't remember the Texans game, he beat Laremy Tunsil twice in that game clean. Yep. And you just don't see Laremy Tunsil lose that way very often. So he still has that capability in his bag, so to speak, that not a lot of other edge rushers can replicate because he is so good with his hands, timing. He's an advanced pass rusher. He's very crafty, and he could string moves together. He could still do that. So, and that Tunsil game really stands out to me and ones that I've seen this year. But, it's just at this point in his career, to be counted on to do that, consistently is probably not realistic. However, I would still love to have Shaq Barrett on my team in my edge rusher room because of just what he can do as a technician, man. That cross chop and just all the moves he has off of it. Like, he's just a really, really good pass rusher who has maximized his physical capabilities to the max. So yeah, that's kind of where he is now. But yeah, all that said, I still think, man, like edge rusher would be a position I would really like to see them, upgrade, in the draft.
Yeah, it's going to be a big debate among the Bucs world. We'll certainly be at the forefront of that conversation, depending on where they land in the draft, whether they go long-term quarterback option, or for me, I'm looking at the landscape saying that, number 1 edge is probably the highest priority I would put based on where they look to slot at this point. Last question, if you don't mind, and you've been so gracious with your time, I appreciate it. one of the real big bright spots this year with the Bucs has been their first round draft pick from 2023. And that is interior defensive lineman Kancey. Another one where the Bucs took a little bit of risk on that pick, just due to his size and his overall length. 6'1", under 290 pounds, short arms himself. But Kancey has flashed in just about every single game this year. Obviously, very advanced pass rush technique. Interestingly enough, we talked a little bit about PFF narratives. They have him as the worst graded run defending defensive tackle in the NFL among qualified players. Personally, I don't see that on tape, but I wanted to see, based on what you've seen of Kancey, arrow up. And what do you think his maximum potential is? What could he be if he maximizes everything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you could watch him and think that there's 63 other defensive tackles or whatever that are, I don't know,
They have over 100.
Right.
100 players who are better in
You're
run
doing
defense.
backups and all that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just that aside, I think when you watch Kancey play, and I haven't sat down and, studied him, this season, but watching opposing offensive lines focus on those guys and then seeing the flashes of him and the ways that he's beating guys in terms of stringing moves together, hitting moves right away and not having to string stuff together, paired with his quickness and his natural leverage and things like that. I think worst case, you have a high-end rotational pass rusher, if not starter here. So that's like worst case. And best case, I mean, you can have like an 8 to 10 sack, interior presence who can penetrate in the backfield as a run defender and, get some TFLs, create some disruption, alter the running back's path, as a penetrator. I mean, obviously when you draft a guy like this, you're not expecting, Linval Joseph or anything against the run, so as long as he's serviceable there, I think that's fine. And from what I've seen, I don't see like this, this major liability out there as a run defender. So I think based on maybe, like what most were expecting him to be, especially in the Bucs building, I'm sure they're very happy with what they're seeing because he's beating guys soundly and cleanly as a pass rusher and some quality guards as well. And I mean, that's what you want, especially a guy. Didn't he have like an injury and stuff? Did he do training camp and all that, or
he missed all of training camp?
Okay.
I think he came back for the Vikings game, which was their first game, their season opener. Played about 11 snaps and then missed the next 2 to 3 games because he irritated what I think was a groin or hamstring injury. Since then, since coming back around week 5, I want to say 5 or week 4 or 6. Against the Lions, I want to say, is when he came back. And that was the game where he forklifted their right tackle, whose name is escaping me at the moment, but really good right tackle. What's that?
What team?
The Lions with Taylor Decker.
Cool.
Yep. So forklifted Taylor Decker.
Taylor Decker, left tackle.
But ever since then, he's been just from our perspective, just been off the charts. Flashes every single game. So
yeah, I agree. In that context of missing training camp as a rookie, I mean, that's really important stuff. So yeah, I mean, all the things I already said, and ultimately, like, I would be very encouraged by what we've seen so far from Kancey.
So, well, Brandon, I really appreciate you coming on. I know our viewers are really going to appreciate hearing about this. I want to give you one more opportunity to kind of talk about where our readers and where our viewers can find you, and then we'll kind of head out. Yeah,
so at Brandon Thorn NFL on Twitter, X, and Instagram. Those would be the 2 best spots. And then if you want to, get into the weeds a little bit and learn, more about the details of the position, you can check out my Substack, which is trenchwarfare.substack.com.
Awesome. Brandon, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. This has been a special edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.